if you leave the economy on its own devices, if you leave growth to do its magic, the most that it could do is provide employment for so many people and leave millions behind. Well, the job guarantee basically says this is not an acceptable situation. There's no reason why we should be tolerating 13 million people who want to work and nothing is done for them. My name is Pavlina Tcherneva. I'm an associate professor at Bard College and research associate at the Levy Economics Institute. What is a job guarantee? Job guarantee is a program for direct employment. It is a program, as the name suggests, that guarantees work at base pay to anyone who's willing and able to work, who has not found decent or appropriate employment elsewhere. So you can think of it as a public option for work. You can think of it as a safety net, employment safety net. It is a policy that will provide on-demand work opportunities for people who want them. Well, the difference between the job guarantee and the universal basic income is that one actually means working. The universal basic income is provided unconditionally to people, all people, irrespective of their income level or labor market participation. The job guarantee it solves a different sort of problem. The job guarantee says if you want work and you can't find it, we will provide it. But there are similarities between the two programs. Both emerge out of a recognition that the labor market has become increasingly precarious and that it doesn't deliver the stable employment opportunities or the economic security that people seek. And so in a sense, they both emerge out of this notion that the labor market, labor condition needs to be strengthened, and people really need to have a way of achieving their economic goals and having a decent standard of life. The job guarantee can be thought of as participation income. At least that's how I like to conceive of it, as an opportunity to participate in the community, to participate in the process of public service provisioning, to organize, if you will, our human power, potential to fill the needs gaps in our lives, in our communities. And so in a sense, you can think of it as a process through which we, or as an institution, which has organized us in achieving some very concrete objectives, filling care gaps, care and needs gaps, providing other public goods. How does the job guarantee countercyclical feature differ from conventional countercyclical features? It is true that monetary and fiscal policies have countercyclical aspects to them. The job guarantee is in some sense superior to those because the countercyclical aspects of conventional policy stabilize or attempt to stabilize growth. But as we know, growth increasingly doesn't deliver strong income growth or employment growth, or in other words, it doesn't really translate in a very quick recovery of the jobs that were lost during a downturn. And so what we've ended up with are the so-called jobless recoveries. And what's also peculiar about that is that with time, over the last few decades, it has taken longer and longer to recover lost payrolls. So it has become the norm to stabilize growth but not stabilize income and employment. The job guarantee does things directly. The job guarantee, by providing employment to those who need it, essentially institutes a pro-employment countercyclical stabilizer. So essentially what happens in a downturn when Lowe's or Home Depot lay off en masse thousands of people, many of those will have all of them in fact will have the opportunity to take a job if they wish in the job guarantee. Now some of them might wish to avail themselves of the conventional counter-cyclical measures like unemployment insurance, etc. And that's fine. But unemployment insurance expires in a few weeks, and the job guarantee will be there. And so for some people, unemployment insurance might not be an option at all. They might prefer a stable employment at a living wage. And so what happens is, in the midst of mass layoffs, some of those people who lose their private sector employment trickle into the job guarantee program. Government spending expands and thus provides the counter-cyclical stabilization, while at the same time provides jobs for those who need it. As the economy recovers, then people can find employment in the private sector. They can return to their previously lost jobs or better employment opportunities in the private sector. So the job guarantee shrinks in a counter-cyclical way when the economy recovers. So what we've got is not only full employment, but we make jobless recoveries a thing of the past. What many economists call full employment, in fact, is a number that hides the true story in the labor market. I mean, 4.1% unemployment today translates to 6.6 million people who want work. Now, on top of that, we have about 5 million more who are in precarious employment, which means that they are working part-time jobs, but they really wish to have stable full-time work. So that is a significant underemployment component that needs to be addressed. Then there are others who aren't even counted. They have been either discouraged or they are not in the labor force because they haven't looked for work in the last few weeks, and we're talking about another million or more. So in a sense, when you add all of these numbers, we end up with close to 13 million people who will disagree with this definition. We are not at full employment when there are 13 million at least who seek stable, well-paid work. So economists have various explanations why this is the most that the private sector can do. If you leave the economy on its own devices, if you leave growth to do its magic, the most that it could do is provide employment for so many people and leave millions behind. Well, the job guarantee basically says this is not an acceptable situation. There's no reason why we should be tolerating 13 million people who want to work and nothing can be done, nothing is done for them. So it's a public policy that says we will eradicate unemployment by simply giving people what they want. In a recent Levy economics paper, I argued that unemployment can be seen as an epidemic. There are many features of the behavior of unemployment, the propagation mechanism of unemployment, and the costs associated with unemployment that make it a seemingly intractable problem. And macroeconomists don't tend to think of unemployment in those terms. So why do I say that unemployment behaves like an epidemic? If you animate the unemployment county level data that is reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics over time, if you animate the behavior, you notice that when there is an initial onset of mass layoffs in a downturn, that initial impulse transmits almost like an avalanche. It transmits like a virus through the community. So you look at a map of unemployment in the United States and you see these hot spots throughout the country that are plagued by high levels of unemployment, rain or shine, in good times or bad. But when the economies enter a recession, that effect is multiplied. You could think of it in a sense as one unemployed person throws another one out of work. And that behavior is really the behavior of a disease, if you will. If you model, the propagation of viruses, this is how they behave. What is also very interesting is that the national statistics don't just mask the true level of unemployment. There are communities throughout the United States that experience depression-level unemployment rates, even in the best of times. And so I think it is very useful to look at this spatial behavior of unemployment, because it tells you something about how you might be able to address it. If you take this targeted approach of the job guarantee and create jobs on demand in a targeted way, precisely in those communities that have suffered unemployment for such a long time, you might actually prevent this avalanche effect. You might slow down this contagion effect and the volatility in unemployment that we observe. So that's one aspect why I think unemployment can be studied as an epidemic. The other aspect is that virtually all of the social problems that we face are in one way or another related to the problem of unemployment. This is very well documented in the cognitive sciences, in public health, health economics, but again, macroeconomic theory, macroeconomic policy is not informed by this research. And it's time to start paying attention because the costs of unemployment are unbearable. We are already paying those costs. Society, communities, people themselves already bear those costs. And what I'm suggesting with the job guarantee is that we can simply spend our resources in a better way. We can create employment for the unemployed, prevent the spread of these various social ills that stem from unemployment, and simultaneously with the job guarantee, address multiple social deprivations. So what we notice, for example, is that unemployment has enormous scarring effects, and they're permanent scarring effects. So there's a permanent loss of lifetime income due to a short spell of unemployment. There is also difficulty getting back into the labor market. Research shows that the longer you stay on unemployment, the more difficult it is to get back into the labor market. You can think of the mark of unemployment as the scarlet letter of the unemployed that they bear with them when they submit that resume to the next employer. And when they see a big gap in their resume, they're less willing to hire them. But the costs don't extend to the unemployed themselves, they also extend to their families. We have good research that shows that families don't do so well, whether it is psychological distress, whether it is children outcomes in terms of school outcomes or nutrition or growth stunting, countless of social phenomena, health and otherwise, are related to the problem of unemployment. And so what I'm suggesting is that research makes a very strong case for the job guarantee. How do we pay for the job guarantee? Well, I'd like to think of it as a federally funded and a locally administered program. I'd like it to be federally funded because the government has the power of the purse. Whatever the policy priorities we have laid out get funded simply by congressional appropriation. The job guarantee in and of itself is not that expensive in financial terms, and I'm happy to talk about that. But the way I'd like to think about it is to think about the real costs of the problem. So most people are focused on the financial costs, and what we need to be looking at is the human wastage. We need to be looking at the enormous number of people we are locking up behind bars because they lack economic opportunities. And I'll give you an example. In the city of New York, to incarcerate a person for a year costs $169,000. A living wage job at the job guarantee will be $35,000 plus benefits. So we are talking about enormous cost savings for states and cities just by simply by paying for goods rather than bads and addressing these social problems. We estimate that the cost of the job guarantee would range between 1.5% to 3.5% of GDP. Now, that would be today when we face a very large hidden unemployment problem. But when the job guarantee is in place, it's also an institution that stabilizes private employment. And so you shouldn't expect the job guarantee to be so large. In fact, you should expect growth to be more robust. And so the costs relative to growth would be smaller. But once again, it's not the financial cost that should be the first consideration. Because the federal government can sustain financially those policies. We really need to be looking at the costs we are already paying. A colleague of mine has estimated that because we tolerate unemployment, we are foregoing every day about $500 million of output. $500 million of output every single day. And by simply employing people to do something useful, we can reverse those real costs.